from all over the world. My name is Ralph Simon. I'm here in London, and we are joined today with a fantastic session. It's a really important one where we're looking for a framework for learning, growing, and thriving in adversity. We're living in difficult times, and there's a whole new generation of people entering the workforce. And in this COVID lockdown period, we need the guidance of some wise people that can show us and tell us what we might be able to do to really enhance our careers, our lives, our ability to earn a living and to make a good living so that we can be successful for our families and our close ones. And of course, the way that we do that is using the principles of simplicity, specialization, creativity, as you can see from the sign behind me, and collaboration. And we have two fantastic speakers with us today. First of all, we'd like to introduce you to Anupam Gupta. Just a brief background on Anupam. Anupam is a very experienced accountant and a consultant in the stock market, born and brought up in Mumbai, based in Mumbai. And he's also the host of a very well-known and successful podcast called Paisa Vaisa, which of course, that type of money is something that strikes emotions for many people. So first of all, let us introduce Anupam Gupta. Anupam, welcome to TEDxGateway.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alf. It's really good to be here and to join you on this really special session. We're going to be presenting to you today the results of 2 years of research on drivers of professional success in highly competitive industries and professions. And I will begin the first half of this presentation and Saurabh will join in for the second half. So let's just get this started right now. So India's GDP has tripled in the past 20 years, and even on a per capita basis, we've gone up to around $2,500 from around $600 20 years ago. And so we've grown faster than any democracy has ever grown in the history of this planet. In fact, India has grown faster over the past 20 years than any large country has ever grown, with the sole exception of China. And yet, all this prosperity hasn't produced any happiness. Nearly half the marriages in our large cities are breaking down. Job security is a source of mental stress for a big part of the workforce. Mental health, as we know, is a serious issue now. So, no surprise then that Dr. Sharmila Banwar, a Mumbai-based psychologist that we spoke to, says that she sees many people who can't figure out how to strike a work-life balance. They understand it conceptually, but can't implement it practically. So, where exactly is the problem? So, we think that at the core of the human inability to find happiness, even after a lot of hard work and professional success, is the wiring of the human mind. If you just look at the picture below, on the extreme right-hand side, it's a very famous picture, and half of us probably see a young woman and half of us see an old woman. In particular, psychologists and cognitive scientists like Nick Chater, Stephen Sloman, and Philip Fernbach are telling us that we suffer from three illusions. The first is the knowledge illusion. We think we know how complex operations work. Like, say, we can explain intricate details of an iPhone or how a massive company like Reliance Industries can work, when we don't even know how common things like a zipper or a flush or even a cycle work. The second illusion is that we can multitask, when in fact we just can't. Our brains aren't wired that way. One example is that you can see people who talk on the phone while driving by, whereas there's enough research to show that even if you're using a hands-free while driving, there is some risk. And third is the visual illusion. So right now on this slide, you think that you can see every word that's here, when in fact eye tracking software has shown that our eyes are only focusing on 12 to 40 letters at a time on a page of a book. And if all this wasn't enough, there is also research that tells us our memories are fallible. So, we think that we are visualize a tiger and then ask them if they could recall how the tiger stripes flowed horizontally or vertically on the head, on the body, and on the tail. Most of them got it wrong. We know we also had got it wrong. So you think that you know what a tiger looks like, but actually you don't. If you're wondering how we've survived so far, our brain is an expert in creating shortcuts and making sense in how to live this world. So that largely helps us to survive through life. How do we actually thrive? How do we push forward to make our lives more meaningful, both in a professional way and to find personal happiness? We present to you the simplicity paradigm. This is our framework. This is what we've done over the last 2 years and research. This is the summary of that research. It's a three-tiered framework that starts from first principles and then goes all the way to the actual result. So the first tier consists of 3 core beliefs: specialize, simplify, spiritualize. On top of this, you have specific behaviors of declutter, creativity and memory, and collaboration. As you implement the six-step structure in your life, you'll see a huge transformation. And that top tab that you see on top there is the result: simplicity in business and simplicity in investing. We find that most effective exponents or most effective practitioners have adapted variants of this theme, of this simplicity paradigm that we are now going to outline to you in the next few minutes. So let's go to the first slab, the first layer, specialization. So we can see that specialization works over the last, in the last decade. One of the enduring themes that has been there in the world is the rise of the specialist, whether it's Virat Kohli in cricket or even Ben Stokes, who we just saw against the West Indies, to Charlie Munger in investing, to Steve Jobs in business, to Shah Rukh Khan or Akshay Kumar. One of the big trends of this last decade is the rise of the specialist. Now, the idea of specialization actually goes back 300 years to Adam Smith, but the recent focus probably came with Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers book, which speaks of 10,000 hours of practice to master your talent early in your career. So one of the questions that most often people ask, we've had that a lot, used to be a question for me also: what do you specialize in? What's the process there? The answer to that is in a simple framework by Robert Greene in his book called Mastery. He says that first, you have to find an area that you love, something that innately appeals to you. So find that subject that intrigues you. Second, find a guru, find a mentor who is an expert in that subject and can help you on that path, probably give you some shortcuts also. And third, once you've learned all of this, you go into what he calls the creative active mode and go build your mastery. So we know of all, the examples that I mentioned are great manifestations of this idea. One example that we can think of is the legendary fund manager Charlie Munger of Berkshire Hathaway. Closer home, there's Ramdev Agrawal. We had spoken to him, and his story is fascinating. He was very clear about 2 things very early in his life. The first was that he wanted to be wealthy, and the second was that he wanted to be wealthy using investing as a mechanism. And he developed skills very early on to this. For example, and I'm talking back in the 80s and back in the 90s, whenever he used to visit a restaurant, to have food, he would have the entire profit and loss of that restaurant in his mind, right down to how many customers are coming, sitting, what time they're spending, what's an average bill that they have, what is the cost for the owner. From there, he found mentors like Sanjay Bhattacharya, who would guide him to develop very, very high levels of skill. And that's what he used to identify great businesses and put serious money behind it. So that's specialization. We'll come to simplify. Now, we are all consumers of simplicity in some form or the other. Some of the largest selling products in the world that simplify our lives, the iPhone, just costs some $500 or less and retails for more than $1,000. McDonald's burgers that have made fast food ubiquitous all over the world. Index funds that John Bogle had introduced, or back home, you have the SIP, the idea that you just have to invest a small amount of money month after month. All of these are examples of prosaic products that deliver simplicity in our lives. So delivering simplicity actually sounds easy. When you hear these products, you say, what's the big deal in that? And these products have in fact changed the world. But creating them is not easy at all. The way that it's done is at 2 levels. The first level is simplification through process, and second is simplification through principle. So simplicity through process, through habit, we can look at Krishna Devaraya, who was a dominant ruler of the Deccan some 500 years ago, and by far the mightiest ruler the Deccan has ever had. And his routine was legendary. Manu Pillai writes in his book, and I quote, every morning he drank 3/4 pint of sesame oil, after which he anoints himself all over with the same oil. He would then work out with weights, exercise with his food, wrestle with his wrestlers till he sweats out the entire oil. Then he would go horse riding before daybreak, and finally, when it's time for him to appear in the court, he would wear a tunic, a brocade cap, and seat himself on the diamond throne. Now you and I can't be, we may not get to be an Indian Maharaj, but extensive research shows that creating a routine is one of the most powerful keys to living a successful life. Then we look at simplicity through principles, and for that, it's a very advanced level of simplicity. And Saurabh Mukherjee's Marcellus, the way that they choose companies to invest in is a great example of that. They follow just two ideas. One, look at companies that deliver 10% revenue growth year after year. And second, follow companies that give you 15% ROE year after year. You just refuse to look at anything beyond that. So that's how you have a discipline in investing. So whether it's the iPhone or the McDonald's burger or the SIP or the index fund, once these products hit the market with runaway success, everyone says it's easy to make. But simplification through principles is the ultimate sophistication. And that's it for me, Ralph. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. That was a good setup for this, and it gives us a good opportunity to be able to introduce you to the next really great participant and speaker on the session. And just to give you a little bit of background before we formally introduce Saurabh Mukherjea to you, just to give you some kind of idea. Saurabh was originally from Kolkata, but he has a really amazing career. He was studied at the London School of Economics, where he got a BSc in economics with a first-class honours, then did a master's degree at the London School of Economics with distinction in macro and microeconomics. And then in 2007, he was involved with a company called Clear Capital, working in the UK for a number of years, and he was rated as the leading equity strategist in 2015, 2016, 2017 by the Asia Money polls. He then decided in 2018, after being involved in very successful business in India, to start Marcellus Investment. And he took the view that his philosophy really revolved around finding dominant companies where the culture of innovation and building new competitive advantages has to be ingrained in every layer of management, because that is what will help them sustain their dominance over long time periods. And the interesting thing about Saurabh's beliefs and his philosophy and the way that he focuses on trying to find best of breed in profitability and company growth is that he has averaged returns on his portfolio investments of in excess of 20% per annum on a very regular basis. So Saurabh Mukherjea, a very warm welcome to you here at TEDxGateway. Take it away.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ralph, and thank you, Anupam, for a super introduction to the session. So, folks,
Saurabh, I'm sorry, we forgot one thing.
Yes, sir.
We didn't mention, he is also the very successful author of 3 important books: 2014, Gurus of Chaos; 2016, The Unusual Billionaires; and in 2018, a book that gave him the title of The Coffee Can Man, Coffee Can Investing, The Low Risk Route to Stupendous Wealth. Saurabh, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ralph. So Anupam took us through the first 2 elements of the paradigm, of the simplicity paradigm. He focused on specialization and simplification. I'll begin with the final element of the foundational layer of the simplicity paradigm. That element is spirituality. Now, it's easy to be cynical about spirituality, and I too was a cynic until I became a professional investor a few years ago. That's when I realized that there are no future facts. There are no future facts which can help my colleagues at Marcellus or myself look after the monies of thousands of Indian investors. Spirituality, to my mind, therefore becomes the bridge between our abilities and our ability to look at the world around us using whatever innate talent we possess. Think about it like this. I don't know with certainty what will happen tomorrow, but rather than staying up all night and fretting about my lack of knowledge in the future, I need to control my mind and my emotions and stay as rational as possible. If I can get better at this, I'll be able to deal with greed and fear better than I can today. Now, the investor who's explained this concept most clearly is Ray Dalio, and he's put it in the following words. The most valuable habit I've acquired, he says, is using pain to trigger quality reflections. If you can acquire this habit, you learn what causes you pain and what you can do about it. And that will have an enormous effect on your effectiveness. Like Dalio, there's another American fund manager, Jason Voss, who we interviewed for our research. He's a deep believer in spirituality, and he believes that spirituality helps us make better investment decisions. Meditation not only helps you relax, it also helps you improve focus. It helps you understand that your family, your colleagues, and your friends' happiness is far more important than your own. In simple terms, both Dalio and Jason Voss have put it in different books. In simple terms, meditation heals your mind and lets you perform better for longer. In Jason Voss's words, meditation techniques are the polishing techniques that help you be the best. You need to find the tools and techniques that exalt your consciousness. Once you discover them and you find that your talents are unique, then all of a sudden magic happens. So that's spirituality. We now move to the more advanced level. The more advanced level skills in the simplicity paradigm. We leave behind the foundational level skills, right? So we begin with clutter reduction, right? And why do we do that? Because even if you and I meditate every day, if we can't manage our tasks and our projects, our system will go back into stress due to cognitive overload. So we're going to make a conscious attempt to focus on what is important. But how do we know what is important? Cal Newport has written 2 outstanding books on this subject. And in India, studying the lives of business legends like Harsh Mariwala have shown us that there is a step-by-step process to reducing mental clutter. The process begins with being very clear about our goals, right? This sounds simple, but it's actually not that easy to do. An example of a clear goal that a fellow fund manager in California gave me last year is this. He said, I focus on very few things: my family, my investors, and my closest colleagues. I deprioritize everything else. Once you have clarity on your goals, you move towards building prioritized checklists to help you with execution. There's superb literature on this. Atul Gawande has written an outstanding book on this. That brings us to the final element of clutter reduction, that is memory, right? Why are we reducing clutter? We're reducing clutter because it allows our mind to be more creative. Memory and creativity have a big role to play. A big priority of decluttering our mind is linked to the fact that we want our memories to last longer. We don't want them to depreciate quicker than they should. And the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve is a concept which captures this phenomenon. So that's clutter reduction. We'll move to creativity, arguably the engine room of high-performing success, right? In the modern free market economy that all of us live in, even if our ideas are only marginally better than those of our peers, we'll be in high demand. Original thought, therefore, becomes the key driver of wealth and success in the world that we live in. That leads us to the trillion-dollar question. How can you produce genuinely original thought? Experts like Adam Grant, Doris Wallace, and Howard Gruber have shown in separate studies that for a lot of creative giants, there are a surprisingly similar list of 5 things that fuel their creativity. Read widely. Right? That's the first element of a creative person. Charlie Munger says he's never met a smart person who does not read widely. Every expert we interviewed for this book, for this research, every expert turned out to be a voracious reader. For my part, I ask almost everyone I meet what their favorite books are. I create a long list in my phone, and then every Saturday I curate that list and order more books. I spend almost all my free time reading. Second element of creativity, explore the world, travel extensively, meet a variety of people from different cultures and religions. Most of what I learned before I became a professional investor came from doing odd jobs as a teenager, backpacking holidays, friendships formed in betting shops, and the bank branches where I worked through my late teens and early 20s. Third element, enhance your memory. People who have highly developed memories tend to have a very high level of ability to focus on essential information, right? They have attentional abilities to focus on essential information. There are specific memory enhancing techniques which are worth learning. You can easily find them on the internet. I repeat again, memory and creativity fundamentally linked. Fourth element of creativity, work hard, produce lots of ideas. It is no surprise that all the creative giants have a high output rate. For example, Oscar-winning film director Saurabh directed 36 movies in a 35-year career. Many of these movies are treasures of world cinema and cornerstones of Indian culture. And the final element of creativity, folks, make friends, jam with other creatives, find allies, find people who can give you emotional support, intellectual support, and practical help. Now, if you wanted to find someone in India who exemplifies all of these characteristics which make for a creative person, you can look at Sanjeev Bikhchandani. He defied convention at almost every step of building Naukri.com, a company which is housed inside the listed giant that Sanjeev founded. The company is called InfoEdge. We now move to the sixth and final skill in the simplicity paradigm. No matter how creative you are, if you want to change the world with your ideas, you need to learn how to influence other people and win their support and collaboration in favor of your cause. The greatest teams that you see in the world, the greatest teams are teams of rivals, i.e. teams of diverse sets of people who might not see eye to eye with each other on day-to-day issues, but who work towards a common goal. The most striking examples of this are the Civil War cabinet that Abraham Lincoln built, arguably the cabinet that pulled America up from the ashes of the Civil War. And back in India, the first cabinet formed after independence, Gandhiji brought together people like Sardar Patel and Baba Saheb Ambedkar, fierce political rivals, and he united them in the common cause of building the constitution which governs our lives. Coming to modern day India, Manish Sabarwal of TeamLease told us how a diverse group of characters built his firm TeamLease. And he used a very striking metaphor. The metaphor is Hoysala architecture, which dates back 900 years and can be seen in the temples of Belur in Karnataka. The sculptures in these temples include lions, signifying power, elephants signifying strength, and horses indicating speed. A good king has to ensure that he has all of these in his kingdom, because any one animal by itself won't be enough. You need the combination. And if you want to see a combination at work, look at the company that Verghese Kurian built. He built Amul from almost a nothing firm at independence. It was nothing. It didn't even exist at independence, to a company which is 3 times the size of Nestle India today. Nestle is worth $22 billion. You can imagine what Amul would be worth were it listed. Amul is collaboration on an epic scale. The Gujarat Cooperative Milk Marketing Federation procures milk every day, 2.3 crore liters of it, from 19,000 village milk cooperatives and from 36 lakh individual milk producers. So that is the 6-part simplicity paradigm. 2 layers to it. The foundational layer focuses on specialization and simplicity. More advanced skills are creativity and collaboration. There are millions of hardworking, ambitious people in our country, but only a select few have the discipline to adopt the simplicity paradigm and do justice to their talents, to peak potential. 2 striking examples of famous people that all of us will know about are 2 famous music directors, R.D. Burman and A.R. Rahman. Their lives exemplify the simplicity paradigm. Both started training as musicians by their early teens. Both became professional musicians by their mid-teens. So by the time they were in the late teens, they'd done Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 Hours. They broke away from conventional paradigms to create path-breaking music in their 20s. And with Peaceful Manzil in 1966 and Amar Prem in 1972, R.D. Burman revolutionized Hindi cinema music. He made music the center of Hindi cinema. A.R. Rahman's Roja in 1991 was rated by Time magazine as one of the top 10 movie soundtracks of all time. Both of these music directors worked long hours with an intense focus on perfection. Most importantly, both befriended the leading producers, film directors, and film stars of their time, and they excelled in collaboration. You need to collaborate if you want to do justice to your talents. So that brings us towards the end of our presentation. For most of the past decade, we've tried to understand the drivers of greatness. We began with corporate greatness in the Unusual Billionaires. We profiled a unique set of companies that delivered outstanding financial performance year after year. We translated these guardrails of having simple rules for great financial performance. We translated this into easy-to-build portfolios with coffee can investing. And finally, we finished this trilogy with an overarching philosophy to live great lives We believe that living great lives is possible. The simplicity paradigm shows us that despite the various hurdles thrown at us by this great country, we can live successful, fulfilling lives. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Ralph, back to you.
Here's a question for both yourself and also for Anupam, which really ties into what is going on in this lockdown period. People in India and around the world seem to be rather demoralized and feeling down during this prolonged lockdown, not only in India, of course, but worldwide, and the symptoms and the experiences seem similar. People just can't seem to get themselves going. So is there anything that the two of you, drawn from your research, can advise to help people change this feeling of being down to seeing a more optimistic way of going through this? What could be done?
It looks like a super question. You could argue this is the question every household in India is asking at the moment. I'll give my 10 cents and then request Anupam to contribute his thoughts. I think the key to staying upbeat, staying positive, and building your strengths to the lockdown is building a routine. What happens is we are used to a conventional routine of waking up in the morning and going to work and then doing our thing at work and coming back home. What the lockdown did was disrupt that routine. And I think central to success through these difficult days is building a new routine where you wake up in the morning, you probably follow a similar routine around breakfast, early morning exercise. But the more routine oriented you make your life, the sooner you realize that the lockdown actually gives you free time that you didn't have. That free time for reading, for pursuing your innate interest. So in my case, I think I've read more books in the lockdown than I've done in the last 3 years. And the book itself, The Victory Project, we finished through the lockdown. So keep using the lockdown to best effect, create a routine. Obviously, you have to work through that routine, but that routine will give you space of mind and time in your diary to do what you innately love, what you excel, what you enjoy at, and you build on your strengths and come out of this stronger, not weaker, better, not bitter. Anupam, your thoughts?
Yeah, Saurabh, I think it's just the triangle that we've shown. You start from specialization, find something that you love to do. I think a lot of simplification has been forced on all of us in the entire world. There's no going out, there's no eating at restaurants, there is absolutely nothing to do. So a lot of simplification in our life, it has been forced on us. You just wake up in the morning and go to sleep, and before you know it, the day is over. Spiritualization is fantastic. I mean, meditation is a big help, especially through these very stressful times. You come to declutter. What's worked for me is just cutting off from every news source. Absolutely. And if you want to know about a certain aspect about COVID or about anything, research deep into that. Find maybe 3 or 4 sources of information and just read on that, and you'll find a lot of anti-consensus. And we've spoken about being original in our thinking, being anti-consensus in our thinking, and you can see that, that people are at a paranoid level, whereas the science says something else. Then, of course, once you've decluttered, then creativity is an individual thing. You could do it in whatever way you want, find something new to do, learn a language, read a book, and stuff like that. And collaboration, I think this has given a wonderful opportunity, especially to people, who are already working within teams, to reach out to others in the team and work on something new. So I think every element in the simplicity paradigm has helped me out on a personal level to take out this time during the pandemic. And we know it's not over. It is still going on. God knows when it will end. Ralph.
That's a good point. And you've also drawn on to something else that's important. I'd like to ask you and Saurabh to comment on this. Indian parents, in particular, pressure their kids to study, to try and earn, to try and get into an IIM or an IIT, to live a successful life. The pressures are intense. In your book, The Victory Project, you give great learnings on how to reach your peak potential. And I was just thinking of the incredible young Indian thinker, outlier, I guess you can call, who invented and developed Ola in India. Have you got any particular guidance you might give to Indian parents or Indian grandparents that are so concerned about what they can do to just help guide younger people into chasing their dreams and not necessarily have to be bound by the rules?
No, lovely point, Ralph. So in a way, one of the reasons Anupam and I wrote this book, right, is is we sort of asked ourselves that when we were in our teens, when we were in our early 20s, what book would have helped us live happier, more successful lives? So our generation, Anupam and my generation, is the transition generation between the socialist era of the 80s and the sort of free market India that we live in today. And in that transition generation, our parents naturally practiced the mores and they had the ethos and the mores of a preceding generation where academics and academic success solely could help you rise in the world. In our generation, as you pointed out from the nice example of Ola, in our generation, it's become relatively clear that even if you pass 1 trillion different exams, unless your creativity is firing at full throttle, as indicated in the sign behind you, unless your creativity is firing at full throttle, unless you're able to stand out with unique and original contributions to the world around you, you're not going to get very far. And in this transition generation, which is not socialism anymore, it's a free market economy, a different type of learning habit is required. You still need to work hard, but you can't just work hard at passing exams. You need to build a multitude of skills. You need to have a variety of experiences. So our book, in a way, is the book that we would have found most useful 20 years ago. And for the generation, for the hundreds of millions of bright young kids out there who want to be successful, we hope this book gives you the roadmap to building the career that you want to build, to fulfilling your peak potential. Because Ralph, you make a super point. You can be as brilliant in academics, but in the country that we have built today, academics alone is not going to take you very far. Anupam, your thoughts?
I will make this quick, Ralph. This is a debate that's thankfully it's happening right now, STEM versus humanities, right? Because India has just caught on to the STEM obsession, like you said, and around. I'm a parent, Saurabh is a parent, so we know how this works. We are there. There are decisions that we take, but we've written about this so extensively in the book. Look at the iPhone. Look at Steve Jobs. He placed engineers. These are STEM masters of design next to artists. So how can you get a product like the iPhone without creativity? You just can't. So everywhere that you see around you, it's a mixture of both. Now, how you pursue that, whether you want to go to an IIM or whether you want to do liberal arts, is your call. But being obsessed about just one, I think it's a little bit, I don't think these are the right times for that. And that's something that we also speak about at our Ralph.
It's so interesting that you raised that point. People always look at Steve Jobs as a great example of unbelievable creativity and bringing science and technology together in an interesting way. And his main designer, the British guy, Sir Jonathan Ives, came from an interesting background because his grandfather was a silversmith. And when he was a young boy, he spent a lot of time in his grandfather's workshop learning how to bevel silver and so on. But obviously, having technology understanding, scientific understanding, and creativity is one thing. But here's a question for the two of you. People are really beginning to believe in these very, very hurried times and the pressure of trying to make ends meet and keep your family going, both in lockdown and just in general, that there must be more to life than just work, where there's nothing else. What do you do to enhance and raise your family? There are certain ways to feel more fulfilled. What is your advice to people that are stuck between their passion, what they love to do, and what they have to do in a job? How can you find yourself in a position where you can do what you love to do and then use that as a basis to earn good money, make good progress in your career? Have you got any thoughts on that?
So I think I have to confess, it took me the best part of 20 years to realize that there is no choice to be made here. You have to do what you love to do. You try any other option in a highly competitive free market economy, you'll just get massacred because if you're obviously unhappy with what you're doing in your day job, if you're unhappy with what you're doing in your day job, you're not going to be creative, and other people who are more enthusiastic about that line of work will overtake you. So I think in a way the world that we live in has made the answer quite simple for us. For every single person out there, unless they're doing what they love to do, unless they're doing something that they innately like, life becomes very difficult. At least achieving peak potential becomes very difficult. Robert Greene makes this point actually very nicely in Mastery. He makes the point that if you really want to go into highly creative mode, you got to lose this line. The line between work and play has to get blurred for you. As long as you're doing this work-life balance thing, you're not going to be hitting peak creativity. For those who hit peak creativity, the line between work and play gets blurred. Whether it's people like Verghese Kurian who built Amul, or whether it is people like R.D. Burman who revolutionized Hindi cinema music. So there is no choice to be made. In a way, your mind and your innate preferences makes the choice for you. You have to do what you like to do. Anupam?
Oh, it's a tough one, Ralph, right? Because there is some amount of romanticism in saying love to do what you want to do. And India, with a population of 135 crore people, that luxury isn't there for all of us. So we've spoken about this in the book also. I think you have to reach you have to slog it out. So I think you start from hard work, and that might not be a pleasurable experience for a lot of people. When I look at the people that we met for this book, good Lord, the various experiences, the kind of lives that they have lived. Sanjeev Bikhchandani, for example, would have struggled to set up Infobeam, and our media is only obsessed on one part of his life. Ramdev Agarwal didn't know English. This is a person who, he actually went and learned English to an extent where his friends in college would come to him for help. So I think we need to be very comfortable with doing immense amount of hard work to reach a point where we say, okay, now there is no difference between work and life. Okay, which what Saurabh said was right. At some point of time, you have to realize there's just life. Work and life are two separate buckets. It's just life, and work is an extension of that. Ralph.
Well, thank you. That gives me some kind of sense. Here's another question. You've told us about what brings happiness and fulfillment professionally, but from the 2 years of intensive work and research that you did for the book and looking at what is peak performance, what did you find to be some of the primary drivers of unhappiness professionally and in one's career or one's work?
I think the consistent one seems to be, especially through, I think the hardest decade for a professional seems to be the 20s, because at that age, you're not 100% convinced of your own creative instincts. And also, as Anupam alluded to in his previous answer, in your 20s, you don't quite have the luxury to pull all the strings that you want to pull to build the life that you want to build. So the 20s seems to be the hardest decade. And then the difference between people who go on to hit peak potential and those who don't seems to be that in the 30s and certainly in their 40s, the peak potential candidates pull away. They choose a certain path. Ramdev Agarwal, fund management, broking and fund management. Sanjeev Bikhchandani quit a job in a multinational company to create InfoEdge. So in your 20s, somewhere between 25 and 35, the peak potential candidates pull away and say, this is my life, this is what I'll do whatever it takes. Staying with Mr. Bikhchandani, he held down 3 jobs for I think the best part of 10 years to fund InfoEdge. Before the venture capital funding arrived, this man held down 3 jobs to fund InfoEdge. He taught as a professor in a business school. He worked as an advertising executive in a newspaper, and he ran a learning center for IIT aspirants. He did all three jobs plus running InfoEdge for 10 years before the funding arrived. So that period between 25 and 35, when you decide this is my calling in life and I'll do whatever it takes, those are the toughest years. Some people bite the bullet and go for it. Others choose not to bite the bullet and regret it for much of the rest of their lives. Anupam, your thoughts?
Yeah, what a question, Ralph, right? Sources of unhappiness. There are just so many of them right now, because Saurabh was making this point about how, there is something in the 20s and there is something in the 30s. I think we made this point in the book also that India is living with expectations of a first world country and aspirations toward that in a country that's actually not reached that. We are at $2,500 per capita income, and the US is probably at an exponentially higher than that. There are 2 things which I feel are sources of unhappiness that, in my experience, expectations and doubt. So doubt is again a function of the effort that you're putting in your career. That we've spoken about how you specialize, simplify, spiritualize. That can actually help you out there. Expectations is a tough thing. India, the kind of politics we have at work, the kind of expectations we have at work. We've taken 2 case studies in something that we've written about, a very, someone a senior professional in her 40s who cannot leave work before 9, 10 o'clock in the night. I know I have, kind of similarly lived that. And the reason is not because there is so much work. The reason is if I leave now, what will my boss think, or what message does that send to my juniors? So I think expectations and doubt, if you can manage that and if you can get clarity, whether it's via a mentor or whether it's via any other way, you'll find a lot of that unhappiness actually goes away. That's.
Well, I think I think those points that you make certainly has some resonance and some relevance. Just one thought before we go into, I've got a lot of interesting questions from all over India and a couple also internationally. But before we do that, one final thing I want to just ask the two of you. You both believe in the importance of original thought and original thinking. And when I think of original thinking, we've mentioned Steve Jobs, obviously, he was very much an original thinker. We think of someone like Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who invented, created, discovered the World Wide Web. And then I try and think of somebody like the Ukrainian American who came to America with nothing by the name of Jan Koum and had an idea in his mind about creating what became WhatsApp, which so many people now use all over the world. So question for you is, what is your view about original thinking? Sometimes it's very difficult when you're doing your studies or when you're in your first jobs to determine what is original and what is not original. How can you give any guidance on that?
So I think in a way, because original thinking is very hard and very rare, I don't think anybody should wake up in the morning and say, today I will strive to be original. It doesn't work like that. What seems to help is the 5-part process that we have laid down in the book. Read extensively, right? As we said, we can't find any substitute for reading. And whilst I would love to say reading social media and WhatsApp will be a to original thinking, the research doesn't indicate that reading lots of social media posts takes you anywhere. You do seem to, there is the need to read books and read books extensively. The second is the importance of cultivating a variety of interests. You cited Johnny Ive, Ralph, lovely example. In the book, we've highlighted Verghese Kurian's own diversity of example, diversity of interest before he created Amul in 1948. So reading the variety of experiences, and then the ability to question consensus, the ability to question the received wisdom. If you can line these three up, if you just line these three up, read. Because reading gives you a variety of mental models, your neural networks become denser and denser, you've got more lenses in your mind to see the world through, variety of experiences, and finally the willingness to the courage to question received wisdom. And if you can get all three together, I think that's as close as we've got to finding the elixir for creativity. Anupam, any further thoughts on drivers of creativity?
None whatsoever, Saurabh. Ralph, it is extremely difficult to have original thought today when you've got your mobile and you've got 1,000 notifications there and another 10,000 notifications on your laptop, and you've got theories of statues with laser beams and all the stuff. I think, addition to what Saurabh said, and this is a daily thing, by the way, I ask myself just one question: what's on the other side of the trade? If the entire world is saying this, what's on the other side of that? That's it. You just have to find what's on the other side of the trade and figure out so that you just balance your mind. Because if you're going to choose consciously to brainwash yourself, then that's just about it. As the saying goes, shit sells. 1 million flies can't be wrong. So it's very compelling to believe that, if something is that popular, there has to be something in it. But you have to keep asking yourself what's on the other side of the trade. Unless you don't do that, have an open mind. That's all. In addition to what Saurabh said, Ralph.
Okay, so let's go to some questions. We've got some really interesting questions from people watching and listening all over India. We'll take two to begin with to ask you both these two questions. One is from Vivek in Bengaluru. Great to have someone from Bengaluru here with us. And the second one will be from Hiral Pandya. So first of all, from Vivek, he wants to know, is there a difference between finite time versus infinite learning options? How does one choose what to learn and what to read and put that into your time? And the second question from Hiral Pandya is, how do you declutter wrong habits? So they kind of both talk about decluttering time and decluttering habits. What do you say, Saurabh?
So I think the reading question I've also pondered about for a long time, and the solution I found, the one I was mentioning in my talk, is ask ask as many people as you can on an ongoing basis. What are they reading? What have they enjoyed reading? And you soon end up with a long list of, I've got something like 500 books on my phone. And then once a week, sit down for 15 odd minutes, look at the reading options on your phone in terms of the list of reading choices you've built, and ask yourself, amongst these, what are the options which captivate, which capture your interest, which appeal to your interest the most? Do a little bit of research on the internet on the quality of the material, and then read away. So build a long list, then curate that longer list to a shorter list basis your interests, and then curate further on the quality of the material. It's not very hard these days to figure out using reviews and ratings on the internet what is good stuff and what is relevant stuff. What you'll soon find is if you do that, you'll end up reading more and more interesting material. You'll end up reading more and more interesting material that others haven't read, have no interest in reading, probably haven't even heard about it. And once you begin that journey of reading stuff that others haven't read, aren't reading, won't read, your mental models start building up. And my personal experience was within a couple of years, your mind has gone down pathways nobody has gone down before. So it does involve reading. I think super question from this person. How you read, what you read is central. Reading lots of social media stuff and lots of newspapers, articles is not going to take you very far. You can just clog your mind up with reading plenty of day-to-day news. It's not going to help. Reading literature helps. Reading high-quality books helps. You've got to build a certain process for doing that. And the more you find yourself reading material that others aren't reading, the more likely you'll hit upon originality. Anupam, do you want to take the second point?
The declutter on habits, yeah. So that's a tough one. Bad habits, there's now enough research, and in fact, our book also talks about this, about how bad habits are difficult to go and good habits are difficult to build. But once you build a good habit, then repeating that is seriously easy. So whether it's quitting smoking, starting an exercise, eating healthy, I think first and foremost, you need to be very clear on your intention, and then have targets. Have very small achievable targets over a period of time. If it's smoking, you just probably go cold turkey, and then you just keep at it over a period of time. You have to just motivate yourself. There is no way that when it comes to decluttering bad habits, you need to be very clear what's motivating you, and you need to have a routine that this is the path. This is how I'm going to let these bad habits go. And every time you slip, give yourself the freedom to slip and be kind on yourself. Forgive yourself. I think you can do it. That's
okay. We got another very interesting couple of questions. First of all, here's a question from Lunal Shah. Saurabh, what are the 5 most important books that you might recommend, and what are the 2 of you reading? That's the first question. And then a second question from Shreyan Lalwani. Shreyan wants to know, is the 5 a.m. club necessary? Can night owlers achieve success?
So the 5 a.m. club one, I'll leave to Anupam. I belong to the 5 a.m. club, but I'll let Anupam answer whether that's necessary. On the books that 5 most valuable books, I earn my living managing other people's money. So from a professional context, books that have been very useful for earning a living was The Rise and Fall of American Growth by Robert Gordon. The book on Capital is an American asset management firm. A man called Charlie Ellis wrote a fabulous book on capital. It's become sort of basis around which we're thinking of building our company, Marcellus. Looking at business people whose lives have played a big role in shaping my thinking. Jeff Bezos and the book on him by Brad Stone. The book is called The Everything Store. It's a super book on Bezos. My obsession around rituals and a lot of the thinking in the book around habits and rituals, including the 5 a.m. ritual that I have, came from a book called Daily Rituals by a guy called Mason Curry. Basically, Daily Rituals is the lives of 300 people and the rituals that have shaped their lives. I found it to be a very useful book. And finally, the way we talk, the way we write, the way we think, a lot of it has been shaped by a lady called Barbara Minto. She wrote a book called The Pyramid Principle, I think 25 years ago. I came across it 20 years ago, and it's been very helpful for me. Anupam, over to you for 5 a.m.
Ralph, could you just, Saurabh, could you just make me understand the 5 a.m. question? I didn't quite get it.
So I think the gentleman is asking, do you have to wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning to be successful, or can you stay up late at night and still succeed?
And do whatever works for you. And I'm a very light sleeper, and I used to be an early morning person when I used to work early on in my career. Our morning meetings used to start at some idiot time of 7:30 in the morning, and I stayed 20 kilometers away from work. So I didn't have any choice. I had to wake up at some 5-6 o'clock. I'm not a big believer in early mornings. You have 24 hours, figure it out. There's enough time. Honestly, 24 hours in a day is massive time. You'd be amazed at the things that you can do. Just build a routine around that. I just like to be flexible. You want to wake up at 5, wake up at 5. You want to wake up at 9, wake up at 9. I have a kid who I have to struggle to wake up at even 8 o'clock for his school. Do you want me to tell him to wake up at 5? He's not going to listen to me. But does that make him less creative? I don't think so. I think it's more of habits than this entire 5 a.m., 6 a.m. thing. In our book, of course, we mentioned a lot about the 4 a.m. routine, the 5 a.m. routine. I think we need to just emphasize on a proper 8-hour sleep. There is enough research. There are 2 books. In fact, since you mentioned books, there are brilliant books, one on breathing and one on sleeping, that have just changed the way that we look at fundamental things like breathing and sleeping. I mean, I would recommend that read these books. I will just about start reading them. But if we are just learning how to breathe properly and sleep properly, just go do whatever suits you, provided A, it's a routine, and B, you have certain goals for the day that you achieve. Uske baad aapko jo karna hai karo. Ralph.
Okay, we've got another 2 interesting questions about the concept of creativity. And the first question is from Rajiv Dutt. Rajiv asks, are age and creativity inversely related? Can one be creative in one's 60s and beyond? And the second part of the question is from a number of different people who've sent in questions. How do you cultivate creativity in your kids or in your family? Is there a way that people can become more creative, or is it a skill that is inborn, born in? When you mentioned some of those names, A.R. Rahman and others, were they naturally creative, or can creativity be developed?
So I think super questions. These 2 questions, right, are basically the 2 questions which form the pillars of the 2 books. So Anupam, I'll take the first one around age and advanced age and creativity. If you could answer the second one around children and creativity, what can be done there? On age and creativity, there's growing evidence that writers, fiction and non-fiction, do their best work in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So, for example, a spectacularly good book, I think in the last 20, 30 years, probably one of the best books of non-fiction written, Guns, Germs, and Steel. Guns, Germs, and Steel was written by Jared Diamond, and I think it was post-70. Post-70, this man produced this absolute masterpiece on how the world has evolved in the last 30,000 years, right? And as I was saying, there's growing evidence to show that people are getting more creative in their 40s, 50s, 60s than they've ever been, and it seems that the internet has a big impact because as you grow older, obviously your mind has become multi-layered through the experiences you've picked up in life. And what the internet is giving you is ready access to other people's experiences, facts, information. And that's why that seems to be one of the reasons why, as opposed to the previous pattern of most creative work being done in your 20s and 30s, the creative peak seems to be shifting to 40s, 50s, and 60s. So for everybody out there, our age and above, loads of good news. There's plenty of creativity in the years ahead of us. Back to Anupam for the more difficult question on children and creativity. Are they born? Can they be made?
I'm going to get your take on that, Saurabh, but I'll just add one more thing on the age part for creativity. I would encourage everybody to just Google the concept of late bloomers and look at the career of someone like a Clint Eastwood. We all know how old he is, and we know the kind of movies he's made in the last 10 years. So, there is enough. Don't let age be a factor out there. Creativity in kids is a tough one. I think creativity in kids first needs to be cultivated in creativity in parents. Okay, so I think once you start from there and let parents have an open mind, I know it's a struggle for me, and I think you just need to give kids a lot of freedom. And as a parent, you need to be very, very accepting of the mistakes they make. I think that works the best to get the creativity out of kids. I think for parents, they are relating creativity and output. And they probably want each output of their kid to be a top 10 on the charts. And I think if that is not achieved, then I think that's a problem for parents. But I think that for kids, being consistent at something for a very long period of time is much better than being number one erratically. So I think that's a thought that I would leave. Then I would actually throw this question back at Saurabh. What's his views on that? He's also a parent like me.
So I think, look, I think on this issue, what I ended up learning from growing up partly in India and partly in the UK is that formal education has a lot less to do with success than we would assume it to be, right? So whether you study in Cambridge, Oxford, or IIT or IIM has a lot less to do with outsized success, with achieving peak potential in the world around us than we assume it to be. And I think that coming to terms with that is a big challenge for parents across the world. I've seen, whether it's my relatives in America or for us in India, the appreciation, the realization that formal education is not going to take my child very far is actually very difficult for parents to come to terms with. And whilst I've understood that, I have to concede, even my wife and I, we're coming to terms with the fact that just by making our children grind through exams in school is not the best driver to achieving peak potential.
Okay, let's take another couple of questions. Here's one very interesting one, a modern day problem really, from Rish Tana. Rish has asked, what does one do when you have a toxic superior or a toxic boss where there's no trust and where they feel like in this COVID environment, working from home, you're on holiday? Can anyone of you give any suggestions as to what do you do when you keep having this issue with someone that is a position higher than yourself that is toxic?
I think Anupam will turn to you for expertise. You're a wiser man on subjects like this.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch this one, okay? Because I haven't had a salary job now since 2013. I don't know what that's like. So this is all yours.
Oh Lord. I think, look, I mean, firstly, from what the question is asking, it's not clear whether the superior is toxic because of performance issues with you, or whether the superior is toxic regardless of how well you perform. Clearly, if you believe that you're doing the best you can and you're performing to peak potential, and the superior is toxic, then clearly it's time to explore new pastures, explore new avenues for growth. But if you believe, before you make that final plunge, I think it's worth introspecting and asking, is my boss toxic because I haven't delivered what I was supposed to deliver? I have worked with both types of bosses. Bosses who were toxic when I was underperforming, and I learned some of my most powerful lessons from those bosses, people who kicked my backside when I was underperforming. In fact, I learned the pyramid principle, the Barbara-Mentor pyramid principle from one such boss, a man called Steve Norton, to whom I owe a lot. He forced me, absolutely forced me. Steve Norton forced me to use the pyramid principle for every memo I write, every email I write. I used to hate him for it for a year, but over the last 20 years, I've sent many silent thank you prayers to Steve. I hope he's happy wherever he is in the UK. I also worked with bosses who didn't seem to be happy regardless of what I did. And those sorts of people can destroy your soul else if you're stuck in the latter situation.
Okay, here's another question. Here's one from Aditya Gupta from Indore, which they say is the cleanest city in India. I don't know if you all agree with that, but it's a question that also relates to COVID. What are some of the observations you've made where you think that something really good and positive can come out of this COVID period? You mentioned earlier on in the session today about the fact that it gave you time to read, Saurabh, but in general, do you think that this slowdown or this working from home does have additional benefits that would potentially be useful for someone's professional career?
I think where COVID has been a supernatural experiment is in encouraging people to think for themselves, right? Back in January, February, March, even in March, there were very few answers on how potent will COVID be, how many lives will it take, how much disruption will it cause. And since nobody had the answers, it was interesting to see how a variety of people responded. Some responded by just completely clogging their minds and their lives with fear. They sold their stocks in the market, they battened down the hatches, and I think must have switched on their over-the-top, the OTT content subscription and watched themselves senseless watching TV for 3 months, right? We saw that sort of extreme reaction. We saw others saying that, look, this is a new business opportunity. At least 2 friends of mine understood that COVID will lead to the restaurant sector suffering, and they launched cloud kitchens, or dark kitchens as they're called in the UK, and their cloud kitchen businesses have been fabulously successful in the last 3 months, right? So COVID has been a great natural experiment. It's allowed the men to separate from the boys, the women to separate from the girls, and we're not done yet. I think there's still some way to go before the pandemic solves itself. It's a true test of character. It's a test of original thought. It's a test for those who are willing to think about the world rationally rather than just blindly follow the herd.
Anupam?
Not much to add there, Ralph. It's a tough one. I mean, at an individual level, we are all dealing with this in different ways. And I think the only thing that's there, and Manish Sabharwal actually said this really well in a TV interview. He said that we are all in the same storm, but not in the same boat. So all this is going to get down to how all of us react in our own ways. And like Saurabh said, this requires a lot of fortitude for you to go forward. For some people, the lockdown's been great. They've had new habits. They've been able to physically, develop a routine, whereas it's not been the same for a lot of other people who've seen their businesses actually go down, and that mentally affects you. But I'll just finish off with what Saurabh said about it helping you to build your character. This is that time, and hopefully we'll all come out better for it. Ralph.
Okay, well, we are running a little bit out of time. So the last couple of questions that we've got, first of all, coping with adversity, whether it's in a firm, or we've even had someone sending in a question saying they work in government, work with bureaucrats, and how do you work in an environment where it is not necessarily creative, where you're working with those restrictions, and how can we grow professionally? Can you just maybe give your tips or a tip on what you think could at least be a growth mechanism, these ideas for going for peak performance that you've got in your book, which I would strongly recommend to everybody that is watching this webinar. Fantastic ideas within it, but what you can say about adversity and what you can also say about the notion of growing professionally.
I think, let me just start on the adversity point. I think what's been remarkable about COVID is, right, how India's authorities have coped with it, right? This is a country which, if you go back to February, March, you would see editorials across the Western media that poor, hungry, poverty-stricken India will be plastered, hammered by COVID. The data hasn't borne that out. 35,000 people have died in this country. Several of us have lost dear ones, but we have lost nothing like the numbers of people that countries far more prosperous with far better healthcare systems than us have lost. Secondly, throughout this pandemic, with the health authorities stretched to the limit, with the law enforcement situation being in flux, we haven't seen civil breakdown, we haven't seen social disorder, we haven't seen chaos. And I think a lot of credit should go to both local and state level authorities for governing the country through an unprecedented pandemic. So India is held up in many different ways, whether it's the stock market, whether it is our healthcare system, whether it is our law and order system. We've held up much better through this than I think I would have imagined myself to have expected India to do. And in the midst of all that, we've had some very interesting situation with our northern neighbors in Ladakh. So altogether, I think what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And it does appear that India comes out of COVID stronger than it went in, contrary to everybody's expectations, including, I have to concede, my own. Anupam, any thoughts on the professional skill building in adverse situations?
So there are two types of people here, in my opinion. I mean, two basically people who actually have a full-time job and are getting their salaries. I think for them, what might be a good idea, since you're already in a very comfortable place, is to find something to build your skills further. If whether that could be writing a blog or listening to music or learning a new language, something that opens you up creatively. Maybe get a reading list and get a lot of reading material in for you to develop new ideas. That's if you have you're someone who is stable professionally. It's a good time to enhance your skills in certain areas. Unfortunately, for the people who either lost a job or who are actually going through a lot of adversity, this is a tough time. My guess is to constantly be in touch with large networks of people. Social media really helps out there. Not all of social media is a pool of trash, which I kind of have a thought on that, but let's leave that aside. But if you know a way to expand your network using social media, then do that. Meet people, talk to people, interact with people, and maybe find a way out there. I've seen a lot of people posting their job requirements on Twitter, for example. So that's one way to actually overcome that adversity. So you might have some views on that also.
So
carry on, Saurabh.
Yeah. So I was saying that the critical aspect of adversity is that you have situations of adversity where you don't have time at hand, and those are super difficult situations because it tests your presence of mind. And then you have situations like COVID where it is an adverse situation, but you do have time at hand, right? Because it's a slow burn situation, right? The economy suffered through March, April, May, but it was a slow burn situation. And in a way, the difference becomes between those who hit peak potential and those who don't is the ability to use time to your advantage. So I'll leave my friend unnamed, but I'll use his example, the cloud kitchen friend that I mentioned. So he actually is a restaurateur in Delhi. He has 3 restaurants. As soon as the Prime Minister announced the lockdown in March, he realized his restaurants will be in trouble. Right? Within the next 48 hours, he started building a business plan for cloud kitchens. We discussed it before, but he put his plans to fruition. And by the time India came out of lockdown, or Delhi, he lives in Delhi, by the time Delhi came out of lockdown in the middle of May, his cloud kitchen was up and running. And now by the end of July, he's got a booming cloud kitchen business. His restaurant business is suffering, but this man realized early on that would be a problem, responded, put a cloud kitchen together. It's actually not very expensive to put a cloud kitchen together, especially for a restaurateur. And he pivoted that much faster, used the time, used his resources. Now, his friend is a childhood friend, well-read, extensive set of interests, constant, curious mind, constantly thinks about new ways of doing things. And COVID ended up becoming initially an adversity, but now a massive opportunity for him.
Well, that is a great example to finish on, Saurabh, someone who saw adversity becoming an advantage, or certainly used creativity to think of a new way of developing a new tool that then led to something interesting, which is often the way that invention can be the necessity of innovation, or innovation is the necessity of invention. So, Anupam and Saurabh, unfortunately, we've been beaten by the clock, but not beaten by the fantastic discussion we've had today. And we'd like to, just before we leave, tell everybody that is watching and listening that we've got another fantastic session coming up this Wednesday, the 29th of July at 5:30 IST, where we will feature one of the great futurists, Vivek Wadhwa, and also C.P. Gurmani, who is the Managing Director and CEO of Tech Mahindra. Here's a slide that